Imagine sitting quietly in your living room late at night. The only sound is the faint ticking of a clock and the soft flicker of a candle nearby. You're relaxed, perhaps even drifting towards sleep. And then, without warning, flames erupt from your body. They engulf you in seconds. By the time anyone notices, there's nothing left but a pile of fine ash. Maybe a leg or a foot still intact. And strangely, the chair you sat on, the books on the table, even the curtains by the window remain almost untouched. This isn't the script of a horror movie or a ghost story told around the campfire. For centuries, reports like this have surfaced in newspapers, medical journals, and police records. They describe a terrifying phenomenon called spontaneous human combustion, or SHC. The idea that the human body can somehow ignite and burn from within, without any external fire. The cases are shocking. They are often gruesome, and perhaps most disturbingly, they are real enough to leave behind crime scenes, confused investigators, and families demanding answers. In this video, we're going to take a long, deep look at this mystery. We'll walk through its history, explore infamous cases, examine the forensic evidence, and confront the science that tries to explain it all. By the end, you'll understand why spontaneous human combustion remains one of the strangest, most unsettling mysteries ever recorded.
The first whispers of spontaneous combustion come from the 17th century. In 1641, a Danish physician named Thomas Bartholin published a detailed account of a bizarre death in Paris. According to the report, a woman suddenly burst into flames while asleep, leaving little more than ashes behind. For Bartholin, a scholar fascinated by natural curiosities, this was a chilling puzzle. How could flesh burn without fire? A century later, the subject returned with even greater force. In 1745, French physician Jonas Dupont released a book with a title that translates to On the Spontaneous Combustion of the Human Body. In it, he collected cases from across Europe, mysterious deaths in which men and women were reduced to ash with no clear source of ignition. Dupont's book did more than just document. It captured the public imagination. One of the most famous stories he included was that of Countess Cornelia de Bondi, an Italian noblewoman who died in 1731. Servants found her remains as a heap of ash on the bedroom floor. Only her lower legs and part of her skull were intact. Her bedclothes and furniture showed little damage. The case was so shocking that it spread through Europe's newspapers, cementing the idea that spontaneous combustion was not only possible, but terrifyingly real. By the 18th and 19th centuries, SHC was not just a medical mystery, it was a cultural obsession. Many victims described were elderly, female, and fond of alcohol. The image of the alcohol-soaked body became a moral lesson in pamphlets and tavern tales. Drink too much, and you might literally ignite. This morbid fascination even slipped into literature. Charles Dickens, in his 1853 novel Bleak House, famously killed off the character Krook by spontaneous combustion. The scene was so vivid and so controversial that critics accused Dickens of promoting pseudoscience. But Dickens defended himself, pointing out that the phenomenon had been documented in real cases. From there, SHC became a lasting part of folklore, half medical mystery, half supernatural curse. While the old stories can be dismissed as superstition or poor record-keeping, the 20th century delivered cases that were harder to ignore. These incidents were documented by modern police, coroners, and even the FBI. Mary Reeser, the Cinder Lady, 1951. On July 2nd, 1951, in St. Petersburg, Florida, landlady Pansy Carpenter stopped by the apartment of her tenant, Mary Reeser, a 67-year-old widow. When she touched the doorknob, it was unusually hot. Inside, she discovered a sight that shocked even seasoned investigators. Mary's remains in an armchair, reduced almost entirely to ash. Only her left foot, still in its slipper, survived the fire. Beside it, a shrunken skull, described as unnaturally small, almost like a doll's, was found among the ashes. Here's the chilling part. Aside from a scorched lampshade and some smoke damage near the ceiling, the rest of the apartment was largely untouched. Newspapers nearby were unburned. Plastic items hadn't melted. How could a fire powerful enough to incinerate a human body leave the room so intact? The FBI was called in. Their conclusion: Mary Reeser had fallen asleep while smoking a cigarette, igniting her clothes and triggering what we now call the wick effect, a slow burn where body fat acts as fuel. But even with this explanation, many investigators remained uneasy. Could a cigarette really cause such thorough destruction without burning down the building? The mystery of the Cinder Lady remains one of the most famous SHC cases in history. Dr. John Irving Bentley, 1966. Another infamous case occurred in Pennsylvania in 1966. Dr. John Irving Bentley was a 92-year-old retired physician who lived alone. One morning, a meter reader entered his house and was greeted by the smell of smoke. What he found was horrifying. In the bathroom, only Dr. Bentley's lower leg remained, still clad in a slipper. The rest of his body had been consumed by fire. A hole burned clean through the bathroom floorboards, but the fire had not spread beyond that. Like the Reeser case, investigators noted the strange selectivity of the burn. Furniture and fixtures nearby were barely damaged. The conclusion? Once again, a dropped pipe or cigarette might have sparked the blaze, and the wick effect did the rest. But the image of a man vanishing into ash within the safety of his own bathroom only deepened the mystery. Now, let's dive into some of the most terrifying and mysterious cases of human spontaneous combustion ever recorded. Mary Reeser, the Cinder Woman, 1951, Florida, USA. On July 2, 1951, 67-year-old Mary Reeser was discovered by her landlord after neighbors reported smelling smoke. What they found is still considered one of the most disturbing mysteries in forensic history. Reeser's body had been reduced to ash in her chair. Only part of her backbone, her left foot still wearing a black satin slipper, and a skull, shrunken to an unnaturally small size, were left behind. Here's where it gets creepy. The chair she sat in was destroyed, but the rest of the room looked untouched. Newspapers stacked just a few feet away were still intact. Police and firemen admitted they had never seen fire behave like this. The case was so bizarre that the FBI was called in. Their conclusion? Possibly a cigarette igniting her clothes. But scientists pointed out that an ordinary fire could not cremate a body to ash without reaching temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Celsius, far beyond what a chair fire could produce. Henry Thomas, The Welsh Mystery, 1980, South Wales, UK. In December 1980, 73-year-old Henry Thomas was found dead in his living room. His body was almost completely consumed by fire, leaving only his skull and both legs below the knees. The bizarre part? The fire had not spread to his furniture. His television was still working, and the room showed no signs of a traditional blaze. Investigators described it as though the fire had been contained entirely inside his body. The official cause of death was listed as burning, but the police admitted it was unlike any fire they had ever investigated. Jeannie Saffin witnessed combustion, 1982, London, UK. This case is especially chilling because it had eyewitnesses. 61-year-old Jeannie Saffin, who had learning difficulties, was sitting quietly in the kitchen with her father when she suddenly burst into flames. Her father screamed that flames were shooting from her mouth and body, yet her clothes didn't seem to ignite in the usual way. Neighbors rushed in and described her sitting like a human torch. She later died in the hospital from severe burns. The terrifying detail? There was no ignition source at all. No matches, no candles, no accelerants. Witnesses swore the fire seemed to come from inside her. Other unsettling cases. Throughout history, Countess Cornelia de Bondi, 1731, Italy, found burned to ashes in her bedroom, except for her legs and 3 fingers. Her bed and furniture were untouched. John Bentley, 1966, Pennsylvania, USA. Only a pile of ashes and his intact right leg were discovered. The rest of his house was perfectly fine. Unnamed victims, 19th century Europe. Medical journals recorded numerous cases, most victims being elderly women, often found burned almost completely in their own homes. What makes these cases so chilling is their pattern. 1. The bodies burn with intensity strong enough to leave ash. 2. Flames rarely spread beyond the victim. 3. Parts of the body, often legs or hands, remained strangely intact. 4. Investigators fail to find any normal ignition source. It almost looks like the body itself becomes the fuel, as if the fire begins within the victim rather than from the outside. So, what could possibly explain spontaneous human combustion? Over the years, scientists and skeptics have tried to solve this fiery mystery, but their answers often raise more questions than they solve. Theory 1. The alcohol hypothesis. Back in the 18th and 19th centuries, many doctors believed heavy drinking was the cause. They thought alcohol could soak into a person's tissues, making the body highly flammable. Sounds logical, right? But here's the problem. Alcohol breaks down in the body. It doesn't just store in the tissues. Even the most intoxicated person's blood alcohol level is nowhere near enough to make them burn like a candle. So, the alcohol theory fizzled out. Theory 2, static electricity or lightning strikes, suggested maybe victims were struck by some invisible electrical spark, a hidden bolt of lightning, or static discharge igniting their clothes. But in cases like Mary Reeser's or Henry Thomas's, there were no burn marks on the walls, ceilings, or furniture that lightning would normally leave behind. Everything around them was untouched. So again, this didn't add up. Theory 3, the wick effect. This is the most widely accepted scientific explanation today. The idea is chilling. Clothing catches fire from something small, maybe a cigarette or a spark. The body's fat melts from the heat and soaks into the clothes. The person essentially becomes a human candle, where the body fat acts as fuel, and the clothes act as a wick. This would explain why the fire stays contained to the body, burning slowly but completely, while leaving furniture nearby relatively unharmed. Creepy detail. In 1998, the BBC program QED ran an experiment using a pig carcass wrapped in a blanket. When lit, it burned for hours, reducing much of the body to ash, while the surrounding room was barely damaged. So maybe that's it? Mystery solved? But wait, not so fast. The wick effect has problems too. It doesn't explain cases where people were seen bursting into flames instantly, like Jeannie Saffin. It doesn't explain the shrunken skull of Mary Reeser. Fire normally causes skulls to crack or explode, not shrink. And in several cases, no obvious ignition source, no cigarette, no candle, no match was ever found. It's like the fire started inside the body itself. Other theories, from the fringe to the paranormal. Over the years, more ideas have been tossed around, some stranger than fiction. Acetone buildup, A rare metabolic disorder could cause people to produce highly flammable acetone in their bodies. One spark, and boom. Ball lightning, a bizarre weather phenomenon that might strike a person directly. Poltergeist activity or curses. Some paranormal researchers claim SHC is linked to supernatural forces, especially because some victims were said to be devoutly religious or living in emotionally charged households. None of these theories have ever been proven. So here's the unsettling truth. After centuries of investigation, science still cannot fully explain spontaneous human combustion. The wick effect is the closest thing to a rational answer, but it doesn't cover everything. So after centuries of terrifying reports, witness testimonies, and scientific theories, where does that leave us with spontaneous human combustion? Is it real or just misunderstood? Many scientists argue that SHC isn't a true phenomenon at all. They suggest most cases can be explained by accidental fires, a dropped cigarette, a knocked-over candle, medical conditions, strokes, heart attacks, or diabetes, leaving people too weak to react when their clothes catch fire. The wick effect, slow burning that explains why bodies are destroyed, but surroundings are not. From this point of view, SHC is more about tragic accidents combined with unusual fire behavior, not some supernatural curse. But the creepy questions remain. Even with these explanations, certain details refuse to fit neatly. Witnesses claiming to see loved ones suddenly burst into flames. Skulls shrinking instead of exploding. Entire torsos reduced to ash, while delicate objects nearby remain untouched. Victims burning in silence, as if the fire consumed them without a struggle. If this was just a cigarette accident, why do these cases feel so different? The human candle, or something darker. The wick effect shows us that under the right conditions, the human body can, horrifyingly, fuel its own destruction. That alone is chilling. But what if that's not the whole story? What if, in rare, unexplained cases, something inside us, chemical, electrical, or even beyond science, can ignite without warning? Imagine sitting at home, safe and calm, and in an instant, you become a firestorm, your body the match and the fuel, your life ending in silence and flames. Spontaneous human combustion remains one of those mysteries that lives in the shadows between science and legend. Some dismiss it as superstition. Others see it as a rare but real medical disaster. And for many, it stands as a chilling reminder. The human body, this vessel we trust so completely, might hold secrets darker than we realize. So, is spontaneous human combustion a freak accident or a terrifying reality waiting to strike again? The truth is, no one knows for sure, and maybe that's what makes it so unsettling. Because when science has no answer, we're left with only one thing: fear.